she doesn't love me because we never have sex. I'll turn to the lady usually and I'll say, okay, well, when's the last time you guys had sex? 2 days ago. Sir, she just said you had sex 2 days ago. What are you talking about? He's like, well, I would prefer to have sex every day, multiple times a day. And it's kind of like, wow, that's clearly a bias. That's what he's thinking.
Right.
And he's telling himself, she doesn't even love me.
Right.
I'm like, dude, man, nobody wants to be with you that much.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Life in the Matrix podcast, a safe place where self-awareness meets transformation, where growth begins and limits end. We firmly believe in the benefits of healthy relationships in our lives, and we know that the cornerstone of healthy connection is effective communication. In case you're wondering why we feel we have something worthwhile to say, well, we've been married now for 33 years and counting, and we're both psychotherapists. Inspiring hope is what we do for a living. I'm your host, Deb Johnson, and my husband is Walter Johnson. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let us know if it's helpful for you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Life in the Matrix podcast. We are so excited to be here today
Yes,
because
we
this
are.
is episode 2.
2.
One of the things we want to share right out of the gate is our sincere thanks to everybody who watched our first episode, and specifically everybody who left comments and questions. We want to address 2 viewers in particular. One young viewer asked us to talk about relationships in the workplace, and a second viewer wanted specifically to know about family programming and to talk about how family programming impacts our relationships. So we did the research. Thanks for that. We went back and we realized that it all boils down to biases. So for episode 2, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about biases. We're going to talk about other communication barriers or just things that get in the way of effective communication, which absolutely impacts our relationships.
Absolutely. Bias is a natural thing that we all are subjected to. And sometimes bias is intentional and sometimes it's unintentional. But like you said earlier, it can affect effective communication.
Yep. Before we get started though, disclaimer.
Oh yeah, disclaimer. Hey, we're both licensed therapists, but we're not your licensed therapist. So if you need therapy, please contact a therapist or a coach.
Yes. So where do biases come from? How are they formed? What happens with that? Sometimes you'll hear people say, hey, we weren't raised the same, whatever the differences may be. So one of the things that Walt and I talked about was we probably need to talk a little bit about our differences. For example, I was raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania by a strong single mom.
And I was born in New Haven, Connecticut, left when I was 3, and I was raised with 2 younger brothers. So we're both the oldest.
Yes, we're both eldest children. I have 1 younger brother. Also talked about some of the other differences that we have, whereby I went to Catholic school in the city of Philadelphia from kindergarten through 12th grade.
And I went to public school.
I was raised by a strong single mom who actually became widowed very young because my father died as a young soldier. My mom, very strong, raised me to be very strong and independent. Some of my biases are still spilling over because sometimes, hey, if you had death of a parent early on, it may reshape your perspective a little bit. Your sense of safety changes a little bit. For
Yeah.
Walt, however,
Yeah, it was different for me. I was raised with both my parents, and both my parents were educators. My mom taught high school biology for over 30 years. My dad taught on the university level. He taught math and computer science for nearly 40 years. So yeah, that's a little bit different.
yeah, and to this date, his parents have been married for 60 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
60 years.
Do you want to share our how we met story real quick?
Go right
Just
ahead.
briefly. We don't want to date ourselves. But we were the product of a matchmaking. Before Hinge, before Match.com, before, I don't know all the other ones, Tinder. I'm not sure of all the apps or the platforms now. But Walter was working outside of Philadelphia, and he spent a lot of time in a town called Allentown, Pennsylvania. And
Yes.
he spent,
Yes. Allentown, nice place, but I would often go to Philly just to kind of maintain my sanity, and just had a wealth of diversity in Philadelphia. So I would often frequent Philadelphia on my free time.
so we said we were the product of a matchmaking. There was an older gentleman who we both knew, unbeknownst to us, of course, because we hadn't met. But I worked with the older gentleman at Family Court in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, because after I graduated from Temple University, I went right to work in the city of Philadelphia working with at-risk youth. And so
Yeah.
I met this older gentleman who, I'm just going to say endearingly, we'll call him Mr. Joyner, which was his name. He's deceased now, but he brought us together. So Mr. Joyner was the president of the North Carolina Central University's chapter of the Alumni Association in Philadelphia,
That's
PA.
correct. That's correct. And he also, yeah, of course, he went to Central. He was also a classmate of my mom and dad, who also went to North Carolina Central. And I actually followed them to North Carolina Central. That's where I got my undergraduate degree. So, yeah, I was participating with the alumni chapter. And I think it was like a gospel concert. And I don't know if I would normally do this, but while I was at the concert, I think he noticed me kind of checking you out.
Okay, so how it went was Mr. Jordan actually convinced my friend and I to buy 7 tickets. And the day of the concert, the weather was horrific. I mean, ice storm, snow, was a mess. So we go to the gospel concert at a huge church in Philly called Mount Olivet in West Philadelphia, and the acoustics were terrible. I'd heard the Central's choir was excellent, but the speakers were broken. So at intermission, I looked at my cousin and I said, "Hey, let's go to IHOP." And she's like, "Bet." So we were on our way out, and Mr. Joyner catches me on my way out. "Hey, you leaving? You leaving out?" And I just chatted with him briefly, and went over to I said, "Yeah, we're leaving. Speakers are bad. We're out of here." Went to my cousin, and my cousin says, "Girl, it's a cutie on duty over there checking you out." And I said, "What?" You know, real silly. "Where?" I glanced back, and I couldn't make out. I just could make out 2 forms, a taller person and a shorter person, but I couldn't see any faces. And then I just turned around to my cousin and said, "We didn't come here for that." We put our coats on, and I said, "If it's meant to be, God's going to make it happen." And we left the church. 2 weeks later, unbeknownst to me, you know, Walter had his own exchange with Mr. Joyner. But 2 weeks later, Mr. Joyner calls me at work, and he says, "Hey, young lady, you think you're woman enough to give this young man I know a call?" I immediately start screaming, like really screaming. "What?"
That's exactly what he did to me. He asked me while I was at work, "Are you man enough to call this young lady?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Because he saw him checking me out at the church, right? So, anyways, fast forward, I don't know who called who first. I don't remember that. But I do remember about a month later, we went on our first date, which was April 9th. I do remember that date. And the rest is history. A year later, May 23rd, 1992, we got married.
We got married, yep.
That was 33 years ago. And we're so happy.
Wow.
So despite the biases or the differences that we had in our upbringing and just where we went to school and all of those things, we have figured out how to navigate those differences, those biases, some of the things that can get in the way of effective communication. And we want to share some of those with you.
You did share when we got married, but just to back up just a little bit.
Okay.
After I graduated from North Carolina Central, I went straight to graduate school. I went to Purdue in West Lafayette, got my MBA. Then I started working in corporate accounting and did that for some time. Actually taught statistics for about 6 years and really enjoyed that. So that just speaks to how we saw things a little bit differently. Because you went to Temple and then you went straight to work and you were working pretty much in the field, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, well, let me just define bias, okay? Bias is a distorted fact. It's like a prejudice in favor or against something, okay? And when I used to teach statistics, I would often say, you know, statistics is the science of making an inference or a decision about the population. And the way you do that is by taking a representative sample of that population. But if the sample that you take is not representative, it's going to be biased. And here's an example, and I don't mean to invalidate you, okay? But if you were to ride by our house, back in the day, I used to keep a basketball goal in the driveway. And let's say you came by our house and you happened to see my wife taking a couple of shots at the basketball goal. And you see her take the shot, she hits it, then she takes another shot and she hits it, and then all of a sudden you leave. You might mistakenly conclude, whoo, she's Steph Curry.
I have not one athletic bone in my body.
Yeah, she is not Steph Curry. That would be an example of bias. You didn't take a representative sample of the population, which is her skill level with shooting the basketball, okay? Mm-hmm. So bias is a thing that can impact our communication because it affects the way we see things. So that's kind of a definition of bias. It's like a distortion, a distorted fact, okay? And again, like we said earlier, sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's unintentional. But again, it can affect and be a barrier to good communication.
Yes. Ladies, don't sleep on the nerds.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm going to define some of the biases that we're going to talk about in this episode. We're only going to talk about 5 today. We will be talking about stereotyping. We're going to talk about implicit bias. We're going to talk about confirmation bias. I think we're going to talk about in-group bias and status quo. Stereotyping is assuming things about someone based on their gender, race, religion, or background.
I got a good example for that. I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. You know how some people will say certain folks love chicken wings? I love chicken wings. I love them. And they might even say, well, brothers love chicken wings. Mm-hmm. My brother, my actual brother, does not eat any chicken with a bone in it. So that's not quite true, right? Mm-hmm. So that's an example of stereotyping.
Right. Confirmation bias. That's only noticing behaviors that confirm what you already believe about someone. It really can prevent personal growth because you already have preconceived notions about a situation. And so you come into it with an attitude of judgment thinking, oh, that figures. And that's confirmation bias, when you keep seeing things over and over that supports your bias that you already came in with. In-group bias is favoring people who are similar to you. For example, similar to you in beliefs, culture, or background. This can make others feel excluded or misunderstood.
I have an example for this, and I don't want this thing to sound like we're just talking about race, but I remember during my corporate days, sitting with another guy, another brother, let's say. We're at the cafeteria at the table together, it's just the two of us. And then later on in the day, my manager, who's a good guy, he's Caucasian, he asked me, hey, Walter, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I noticed you and so-and-so were sitting together. What's that about? And I didn't say this out loud, but in my head I was thinking, wait a minute. You guys all sit together, 10, 15 deep at each table. What are you talking about? Now, again, that's what I was thinking in my head, but that's just an example of that type of bias.
And actually, there's a book by Dr. Beverly Tatum. She's a former president of Spelman University.
Oh, yes.
And the title of that book is called Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together at the Table?
Yes.
Great book. If you ever want to go down that rabbit hole, definitely, we think you should check it out. Status quo bias is resisting change or growth in a relationship because things have always been this way. That can stunt development and lead to dissatisfaction. I don't know how many people that we've met, it's been our experience when we do therapy with couples, that some people will come in, sometimes it's the wife, sometimes it's the husband will say, well, that's just the way I am. And there's no willingness to change. So in layman's terms, basically the status quo bias is your unwillingness to change. If you're unwilling to change, there is no growth. There is no change.
Oh, that's a good one.
When we talk about the last bias that we're going to talk about today, I think you said you're going to introduce.
Yeah. I love this guy, by the way. His name is Dr. Albert Van Dora. Unfortunately, he passed back in 2021. But he is the guy that came up with social learning theory. And basically what that says is you are the product of the environment and the stimulus around you. He did this famous experiment. Now I'm going to kind of abbreviate it. This was back in 1961. He did this experiment with, say, some first graders. He had an actor come into the classroom, blow up a Bobo doll, which is like a big air blown up doll shaped like a bowling ball pin. You could punch it, it would go back and it would come back, right? So that's a Bobo doll, right? So the actor is acting like a teacher. He comes into the room and he just starts beating the crap out of the doll, just beating the doll up. Now, the students are like, maybe they're 5 or 6, and behind this glass, they're being watched by researchers. And the researchers are just watching and timing things. And what happens once now again, I'm abbreviating the experiment, but once the adult leaves the room, it's not maybe more than 5 or 6 minutes, the kids get up and beat the crap out of the doll. Now they've done this experiment, it's been repeated all over the world, Canada, America, Mexico, South America, all over the world, the Far East, throughout the Middle East, and they got the same result, no matter what the race or the ethnicity or religion of the person. And this really goes to show that we also learn from what we see. And from his work, we get sayings like, you are the average of the 5 or 6 friends that you hang around. And this may sound a little harsh, but if everybody in your crew is stupid, is that harsh? There's a good chance, well,
You might be stupid.
yeah. So we are the products of our environment. That's why we have to be careful and check the facts before we just get all caught up in the way we feel about something. Because sometimes it has a lot to do with the social environment in which you were brought up.
That's right. So that brings us to the last bias definition for today. And it's going to segue into what the viewer asked questions about, which is called our family programming. So implicit bias, unconscious attitudes or associations which can influence how we treat others, often without realizing it. And when we think about what Walter just shared about the Bobo doll experiment, and I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, kids live what they see. You know, lots of times parents are, going on with life, maybe not paying attention to what their kids are just soaking in. But the kids are soaking it all in. And sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes, a toddler may embarrass you, or, because the daycare provider may come and ask you a question at the end of the day when you pick them up. Hey, are you guys cursing in your household? Because your toddler went right on into school and shared or just expressed themselves based on what he or she is learning in the household without you even paying attention to it. So we're going to go back just a little bit and answer the question to the viewer, the young viewer who asked us specifically to talk about workplace relationships. And workplace relationships are often influenced by those implicit biases.
Matter of fact, early on in our relationship.
Oh, I'm glad you were going there.
Early on in our relationship, and I don't know, I wasn't maybe that savvy, because I used to maybe say things I shouldn't. I would turn to my wife and say, why in the heck did you become a social worker? Who does that?
Yes, he did.
And at the time, I was, I had my MBA and I was in corporate America, and I was just thinking
and
that
he knew everything.
Wow. Okay, maybe. It was like, wow, that was so silly of me, because today I'm a psychotherapist, a social worker.
Yeah.
And actually, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I wish I had got into it much earlier.
Actually, My mother was the first social worker in our family.
During that time, when we were making a pivot, he literally made a pivot.
I ended up leaving corporate America, and we started the behavioral health company. And it was at that time that the business really resonated with me because, I wasn't a therapist, but it was so rewarding to go home feeling like, wow, I helped somebody.
Yes.
It's more than just, well, let me make sure these account reconciliations add up and blah, blah, blah. And that's important work too. But it was just different for me to leave knowing that maybe you kind of helped somebody.
Right.
It was a feeling I just didn't think I would have that much, respect for. But
right.
now
in your workplace.
Yeah.
But you also said, you also owned that my relationships at work.
Yeah.
Over the years, he would, he'd go to work and, sometimes complain about being in a fishbowl and that kind of thing in corporate America.
Right. It was always like you were working with your friends.
My relationships at work were, hey, how's work today? Great.
Yeah.
Because when I decided to do what I do, I thought to myself, and my husband supported it fully, in terms of, well, sometimes he would say out of the way things. However, he was the one, when we moved to Wisconsin, because I did my graduate work in Wisconsin, my mindset was find out what you love to do and then find out how to make the most money doing what you love to do, which required me to have to go back to graduate school and get my master's in social work. And that was a carrot for me because the corporate world was so volatile at the time. And Walter got an offer. I think you were teaching at that moment, but before you went back into corporate, because we've made many pivots. And if you've been married as long as we have, you will make many pivots. And one of those pivots led us to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because he started working with Rockwell International. And the carrot for me, and I felt so supported, it's kind of like, he loves me. He came home one day and said, he had his interview, and he came in and said, if I can share my bias, they told me to come home and talk to my spouse. And my initial response was, you're on your own. The kids and I are not going.
You said you are not going to Milwaukee.
Yes, I absolutely said, actually, folks, be careful what you say. You absolutely never are going to be careful if you say, I'm absolutely never going to do blah, blah, blah.
Right. And that's one of those biases.
That is all or nothing thinking, right? That's a bias. You kind of think, okay, I'm not doing that. So I said I wasn't doing it, that the kids and I were not going. We're going to stay here in Fayetteville, and we can just do a commuter marriage. You can go ahead on to Milwaukee, Wisconsin on your own. We're staying here. And he comes in the door and says, he knew what I wanted to do, and he comes in the door and says, hey, this is before the digital world just took over. He said, hey, the University of Wisconsin has that Master's in Social Work program. And if I were a doggy, my ears would have went, whoop. And he says, yep, the application came in the mail today. So same day that he said, the bosses wanted me to talk to my spouse about this opportunity, he hands me the application for the Master's in Social Work program at the University of Wisconsin. That's a story. Another story that we probably need.
And we were moving. Packing up the house.
Right.
To head to Milwaukee.
Wisconsin.
I don't think either one of us ever thought about Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
There's that word again, never.
And,
don't say it.
Yeah, you shouldn't really say that word because lo and behold, we end up moving to Brown Deer, which is in Milwaukee County, and
yes,
it was nice.
It was wonderful. We met wonderful people there. I completed my graduate work there. Our marriage was strengthened there. I'm going to say that. We were away from our families. We had to rely on each other. And that was a pivotal moment for us in our lives together, right?
Yeah.
Even though Walter didn't understand, the profession that I was in, he knew that it was important to me. And he watched the quality of my relationships, my workplace relationships over the years.
Yeah. But once we got into it,
right.
The people
Right.
called, and that really resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, you know what, I'm not getting any younger.
Right.
And that's when I decided to go back and get the second master's.
Right. Well,
to
I'm
get
not
the
gonna say
MSW.
it was shallow.
Yeah.
I would say that you were.
Well, it was a bias.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was a bias based on inferences that you made based on the information that you saw in the world.
Yeah.
That didn't necessarily talk about all the details.
Correct.
Of this profession.
Yeah, because my idea, I didn't mean to cut you
Go
off.
ahead.
But my idea of a social worker was,
Yeah.
that's the person
Child
that
protective
comes-
services.
yeah, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Because I didn't understand. I didn't
Right.
understand how vast the field was. So sometimes we all have these biases,
That's right.
and we don't really understand the complexities of things.
That's right.
The biases are a big deal, and we got to understand that they can impact not only how you feel, but they can impact decisions.
Yes.
Any kind of decision. I think we're going on and on about
Right.
that, but
And in the
Yeah.
workplace, you just have to be mindful that even your colleagues, those relationships at work, all of us are impacted by biases. It's what
Yes.
we bring to the table. It's our invisible knapsack full of everything, all of our upbringing, our wins, our losses, our coping skills that were healthy and our coping skills that are not so healthy. But all of that is with us.
yeah. And I think, doing therapy, you meet people and you see yourself in those people.
Yes.
Like I have a lot of clients come in. My clients are mandated to come in because of some kind of legal record. And a lot of clients you'll hear, they'll say, well, I assaulted her because she disrespected me. Or a guy might say the same thing. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, what's that about? Well, Mr. J, I had to get my lick back. I had to get my lick back. And you wonder to yourself, well, why did you have to get your lick back? And it's like, well, that's how we roll. That's how my people, my gang.
That's that status quo bias again. That's what we did.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
Yeah. And so that programming dictates how they move. But in actuality, do you really have to get your lick back? And a lot of times the answer is no. And I think the way we think can drive us into these areas where it's dark and creepy and you get into trouble with your partner. Oh, another example. A lot of times young couples will come in, and I would hear this a lot. The gentleman might say, well, Mr. J, she doesn't love me because we never have sex. We never have sex. And then I'll turn to the lady usually and I'll say, okay, well, when's the last time you guys had sex? 2 days ago. Sir, she just said you had sex 2 days ago. What are you talking about? He's like, well, I would prefer to have sex every day, multiple times a day. And it's kind of like, wow, that's clearly a bias, because that's what he's thinking.
Right.
And he's telling himself, she doesn't even love me.
Right.
I'm like, dude, man, nobody wants to be with you that much. It's just bad thinking.
Yeah.
Some people, we're biased by the way we see things. And unfortunately, we're all a little bit self-centered. And it takes work to get out of that self-centeredness. Everybody doesn't see the world the way you do.
Language matters. So, while we're talking about biases, sometimes, like my husband just said, sometimes it's bad thinking, but it's really just biased thinking. It is how you were programmed coming up. Like, maybe in your community, in your household, maybe, some of your patients have seen their uncles or whatever, maybe they've witnessed DV in their household, like
Domestic violence.
So it's still biased thinking. And I think sometimes because language matters, when we frame it in a way that says, hey, many of us are subjected to, all of us have been programmed by our experiences and our family relationships and our generational lessons that have been passed down. But if we say, hey, status quo bias at the core just means unwillingness to change, then you're more aware now that, oh, it doesn't have to be this way, even though that's the way it's always been for me. I can change. Okay. Self-awareness is where it begins. You can begin to transform your relationships, your life, even your biases, because now you're aware of those things.
Right.
And you can make those changes.
Yeah. So not only can you have better relationships,
Yes.
you can live the life that you want.
Yes.
It's so important to be aware of these biases because they can get us in trouble.
I just want to finish implicit biases, guys. I want to talk about those, similar to what your client said. Oh, that's what we did. Implicit biases are unconscious influences, perceptions, and attitudes that impact how we relate to others. Sometimes it's called judgment. You know, sometimes people, I don't know if you've ever felt judged just because you walked in the room. You did nothing, but you felt an air of maybe ostracism or, you know, like, oh, is somebody following me? I don't know who's been followed. I have in stores, you know, because somebody assumed something about me based on their prejudices, right? These biases have developed over time. And it's at the core of what's called family programming. And this is specifically for the viewer who requested this. Absolutely think about, what were you taught? Where do your beliefs about things come from? When were your behavioral patterns formed? How were they formed? What was modeled for you? And remember, in your household, parents, especially parents of young people right now, remember, children live what they see. They live what they see. That's what that Bobo doll experiment was about, right? It was what they witnessed. And think about the community, you know, the family nucleus, the extended family. Kids are living what they see. Cognitive behavioral therapy, we give credit to
Dr. Aaron Beck.
Dr. Aaron Beck, right? And he is a psychiatrist. He's deceased now. However, he said that he did his studies on people with depression, and he, on one of his studies. And,
He's the guy that came up with the Beck depression scale.
Absolutely, that we still use today.
Yeah.
And from his studies, this evidence-based information that he gathered, he said that many people are depressed based on what's coming from inside, what they're thinking, what they, you know, and their feelings and thoughts, all that's coming from inside, not necessarily external. So he talks about this. There's a cognitive triangle in cognitive behavioral therapy, sometimes called CBT. The way we feel shapes the way we think, which shapes the way we behave.
Correct.
So there's a little book called "As a Man Thinketh, So He Is." You know, I think about that sometimes. Because of how we feel, then we may behave in accordance to how we feel.
Yeah.
And we want to talk about that because there are things sometimes called cognitive distortions. Language matters to me, so rarely will I talk about a problem or distortion or something like that, because sometimes if you say, oh, your thoughts are distorted, somebody's naturally going to resist. So lots of times in my practice, I say, hey, resist the urge to resist. And I also will say that cognitive distortions are also called unhelpful thinking styles. You know, somebody may call them unhealthy. All of the terms matter. All the terms, they coincide. But let's go with the unhelpful thinking styles. There's many of them, but today we're only going to talk about 8 of them. So we were talking about cognitive behavioral therapy and those unhelpful thinking styles that can get in the way of effective communication. And when we think about communication in our healthy relationships, come on, that's at the core, effective communication.
Yeah.
Like we talked about in episode 1, with communication, we're either invalidating or validating the cognitive distortions, or let's say, I'm going to call it an unhelpful thinking style. Is the first one that we're going to talk about is magnification and minimization. In layman's terms, my mother would say, don't make a mountain out of a molehill.
Yes.
Some people will absolutely make mountains out of a molehill when it's really not that serious. And then sometimes people will minimize things that are very important. Like, you know, some people, you know, will complete their 4-year degree and say, yeah, I've just decided I'm not going to walk. Minimizing, that's kind of important. Like if your family, you know, supported you through this journey, they may be really excited about, oh, wow, so-and-so's getting ready to graduate, I'm going to do this. And somebody, if you minimize it and say, yeah, well, I just decided not to do that. That is minimization. That's still very important. That's a success that you've attained. That's an accomplishment that you've attained. And then you decided, no thanks. One of the subsets of magnification is catastrophizing.
Yeah.
And that's just seeing only the worst outcome of a situation.
You know what, babe? I think you probably have an example of
Absolutely. I'm a catastrophizer. I can own that. I can own it. I shared a little bit about my background. And one of those things is my dad died as a very young soldier. And I think the story I'm telling myself is it shaped my perspective so that I don't trust that my people are going to come home every night. Therefore, I will spaz out if I'm trying to reach either one of my children and they don't text me back. So it got really bad recently.
Yeah.
Last weekend, in fact. I texted my son about 8 p.m. and my son typically responds immediately to my text, but he did not that night. And then a couple hours later, I had fallen asleep and we were awakened by a phone call from my father-in-law. And then my father-in-law, I overheard my father-in-law say, yeah, we've been calling him and we couldn't get him on the phone. Oh, you could not tell me that my son was not kidnapped at the rest stop that he typically stops at on his way home and being sold into human trafficking.
Can I point out, he's 28. Go ahead.
He is 28. He is fully grown. And I have a tendency to absolutely go there fast, you know.
And I guess it's not all bad. I remember when we were first dating and I would drive to Philly. And I had no sense of the danger in the city.
Oh, yeah,
you remember going out on the first date?
Yes.
I got out of the car. I never locked my doors. Why? You know, but I remember getting out of the car and you're like, oh, what are you doing? I had my briefcase, my computer, everything on the seat. You was like, you got to go back and lock the doors. Do you remember that? I was like, really?
Yeah. And he thought I was catastrophizing, but really I was just I guess.
Well, that's what you're used to.
Absolutely.
You know, so
my bias was,
yeah, you better lock it down.
or you will get got. The next one we want to talk about, overgeneralization. Be careful to not overgeneralize because you don't know everybody's story. I saw something on Facebook years ago and it said, you don't know my story, don't judge me by the chapter you walked in on.
A lot of people overgeneralize.
Yeah.
I remember when I first got to Purdue out in the Midwest and I'm getting together with some of the guys in the program, and I remember one guy asking me in particular, because we were driving by a field. Now he knows I'm from North Carolina, and he's like, "Hey, Walt, what's that in the field?" You know, like I grew up on a farm or something. I'm like, man, I don't know what that is.
Right, bias.
Yeah, bias.
So if Walt got offended by that would have impacted their relationship. You know? So the next one we want to talk about too is personalization. And you had a good example for that one.
Like main character syndrome. I remember early on in the relationship, we would visit your mom, and I'm not exactly an early riser. So, are we married then? Yeah, I think we were married. So I'm laying in the bed, and I'm like, wow, my wife is up, and I could hear her downstairs talking with her mom and her aunt. It's like 4:45 a.m. It's like maybe 5 a.m. I'm thinking, who gets up that early?
We're early risers.
I don't want to talk to nobody. But anyway, I hear them downstairs, and they're having a great time. There's all this laughter and just deep belly laughs. And all of a sudden in my mind, for some reason, I start thinking, are they laughing at me? Are they telling jokes? Or are they talking about me? And it's so ridiculous. Now that I think back on it, it's like, wow, that's like a bias, you know, and
an unhelpful.
What were you guys laughing about anyway?
Who knew?
Oh, okay.
We talk about everything all the time, so you know.
But yeah, but the point is, it wasn't about me.
It wasn't about you,
right,
at all. Right. So another one that I'm guilty of, kind of correlates a little bit with catastrophizing, is jumping to conclusions. You do not have all the facts. You have insufficient evidence, but you jump to a conclusion about it without having the evidence. Unhelpful thinking style.
Yeah.
You had an example of that one time.
Oh, I got a lot of examples.
When I was working late.
Oh, yeah. You know, because in my childhood, my mother was a high school biology teacher. She was home by 4 or 5. I think my dad would have tore down the city if my mom was not home at that time. And that may be an exaggeration. But yeah, one night you're working late with a client, and I think it's going past 7 or something. I'm thinking, what? Where's my wife at? And your mind just starts to wonder, and you're thinking the worst. Like, what's going on? Is everything okay? And I do remember kind of losing it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's saying it calmly. He lost his mind. He called. I said, "Hey, I told you I had a new client," and he just went,
Right.
I'm coming down. Come on
Yeah.
down here. It'll be okay. It'll
Yeah,
be
that's
okay.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I've had clients come in who have those kind of biases. Like they might say something like, "Mrs. Johnson, I'm just not good at reading." And it's kind of like the next word that they say should be, "Yet I'm not good at reading
Language matters.
yet," or "I'm not good at math." It should be "yet,"
Yet.
because if you don't say that word next, it's kind of like you're demonstrating a fixed mindset, and that can be bad too.
Yes.
We don't want to walk around with a fixed mindset. That
Yes.
can cause distress.
That can cause distress. One of the subsets of jumping to conclusions, well, there's 2 of them. There's mind reading, and there's also fortune telling. So one of the things I want to say about mind reading is this. None of us can mind read.
No,
It's impossible.
nobody can mind read.
You can't possibly know what the other person is thinking at all times, even if you've been together
Like,
for a
check this
long
out,
time.
Dan. What do I want for Christmas this year?
I have no idea.
Because we can't mind read.
can't mind
We
read.
can't mind read.
Yes.
So, yeah. And I remember early on, you would say something like, "Well, you should know me
Yep.
by now. You should know blah, blah, blah." And it's kind of like, it doesn't matter if you've been married for 11 years. You're not going to know.
Right. Let's go on to should. But should statements are a fixed mindset, right? It's a stuckness kind of thing. Sometimes it's not always projected onto others. You could keep yourself in a cage if you put shoulds and musts on yourself.
Yes.
I shoulda, woulda.
Yes.
That's not
yes.
a helpful thinking style.
No.
Okay,
no.
let's go back to fortune telling.
You want to go back to fortune? Okay.
Yeah, because you were fortune telling a little bit when we had to make that
Yeah,
move.
when we had to move to Milwaukee. I remember going online looking at different jobs, and I saw this job located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm thinking, they're not going to hire me. So I just submitted my information anyway. And lo and behold, they hire me. And they roll out the red carpet, so to speak.
Yes.
And next thing you know, we are headed to Milwaukee. And you once said you would never go.
Which is another unhelpful thinking style. That's all or nothing thinking, right? That he's going to. Because
Right.
I said, that's speaking in absolutes.
Yeah.
I never, always, those absolutes don't necessarily exist, right? There is
Right.
some gray matter, right? There's some gray matter. And sometimes I say, hey, I don't live in the gray. But not living in the gray means I want some clarity, and we need to assertively communicate so we can have clarity. But that year, well, one of the things my husband and I would do, with planning is, we would say, hey, where do you want to be? Where are we going to be in 5 years? What are we doing as we set out the new year, whatever? And I, with sass, said, all I know is I ain't never going to live no place where there's
Yeah.
a whole lot of snow.
Yeah. You used to roll your head a lot back in the day.
Yes, I did. Same year, that's the
Right.
same year. He thought he wasn't going to get the job in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. God had other plans. He got the job in Wisconsin, and by November, even though I was dragging my feet
Wow.
as long as I could,
Yeah.
the house had to sell here and everything. Our
Well,
steps were
they
ordered.
bought the house.
They bought the
I
house.
was there in August.
He was there in August working on the ground, sent the resume out in May. By August, he's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin working. And by November, the kids and I were there. And we lived in Wisconsin for 3 years. If you've ever been to Wisconsin, Wisconsin gets a lot of snow.
Oh, yeah. It gets a
careful.
lot of snow.
Be careful about that. Never, always.
Yeah.
Absolutes. Be careful. That's an unhelpful thinking
And this
style.
has nothing to do with anything. But I remember coming back from Christmas break. I think we had went south for the holidays. Got back. We get to the house, and I'm not kidding. There's probably 25 inches of snow.
Yes. Facts.
And I can't even get into the driveway.
Facts.
And it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
I remember the next day, because in North Carolina, the whole city shuts down
Yes.
if there's a threat of snow. I called my boss. And I remember saying, hey, I guess we're all staying at the house today.
Based on his bias.
Yes, based on my bias.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost like the boss, he didn't say it this way, but the boss was like, man, if you don't get into this office. And it was like, wow, the city doesn't stop.
It does not stop.
In Milwaukee, it was amazing. It could be 20 inches of snow,
Yes.
and the roads were clear.
Yes.
So yeah, bias is a thing. I mean, I was really, my feelings were hurt when he said, oh no, man, you got to get into work.
3 years that we lived there, school only closed twice for the kids.
Yeah.
And that was because it was
They
just
did
too
an
cold
excellent-
for cars to
Excellent
crank.
job.
The next one is emotional reasoning. What we want you to take away is, together, feelings are not facts.
They're not. Feelings are not facts.
Period.
Just because you got a feeling, that's just a feeling.
Doesn't mean it's factual.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of times, you want to suggest to people, just because you have a thought, you really need to put that thought on trial.
Yes.
Because it's not necessarily guilty. It could be innocent.
Yes.
It could be right. It could be wrong. And we need to assess the thought.
Yes. You need to challenge that thought.
Yeah, because
right?
there could be some bias.
Yes. And the last one we want to cover today is disqualifying the positives. And I don't know, parents, sometimes I would be guilty of it. We have these genius babies. They would come home with 6 A's and 1 B, and we're sitting around the dinner table talking about the report card, and first focus is, what happened to that B? How come that B wasn't an A? Absolutely disqualifying
Yeah.
the positives that your baby brought home. You
Yeah,
know?
and that can be dangerous.
That's dangerous. That's an unhelpful thinking style.
Yeah.
And it kind of, it could be a part of his or her programming to be perfect. And perfectionism is not healthy either.
It can cause harm. And
Yes.
and really in your relationships, you should try to catch your mate or your loved one doing something right.
Right.
It shouldn't just be about catching them doing something wrong.
Right.
And that can really be negative.
Yes. One example I have about that, about disqualifying the positives, is my husband, my sweet husband, asks me to walk at the Cape Fear River Trail. And I 100%
Yeah,
hate the
you don't
path.
like it.
It's not my favorite. I don't like the hills, and I'm a whiner sometimes. I get to whining at the path, and my husband will say, give me 5, Deb. And that's 5 things that I'm grateful for in the moment. Gratitude and negativity cannot live in your mind in the same headspace at the same time.
Right.
So you'd be amazed at what channeling gratitude will do for you. Some people are grumbling about having to go to work. Channel gratitude. Aren't you grateful that you are employed? That you have a job to go to?
Right.
You have a car that works.
Yep.
You woke up this morning and you're going to get paid on Friday, whatever your payday is. Either way, if you channel gratitude versus focusing on the negative, disqualifying the positives in your life, then you'll be transformed. Transformation will happen.
Absolutely. I think some of us, we focus on the negative so much, it's almost like if your brain were a muscle, you're building that part of it up
Yes.
too much.
Yes.
And you don't want to do that.
No.
And like you said before, if you channel some gratitude, like, hey, I got sneakers, I'm healthy enough, and my
To
knees
walk.
work, I can
Right.
walk.
Right.
You don't have space left in your
You
mind
do not.
for the negativity.
You
And I
don't.
love the idea that, the brain really can only do one significant thing at a time. And I know that's just a theory, but it's a good theory. So we should try to practice gratitude, and maybe we
Yes.
can talk about that on a different episode,
Yeah.
but it's important.
We talked about a lot today. On this podcast, we talk about the intersectionality of self-awareness and transformation. Once we are aware of some of the communication barriers that get in the way and the biases that we seemingly just come with, to any of our places of work or just engagement with others or how we relate to others, then we can begin to recognize them and change them.
The other thing that we want to try to do to keep bias at bay is be self-aware.
Yes.
Try to be self-aware. Check on yourself.
Yes.
Ask yourself. All of these things we need to be more aware of
Yes.
because otherwise we may be biased.
That's right.
And I think I said it earlier, we need to be about the business of putting the thoughts on trial. And you referenced Dr. Aaron Beck and the CBT triangle.
Yes.
Thoughts influencing how you feel, and how you feel influencing
Influences how you act.
But those thoughts, we need to put them on trial.
Yes.
Because they're not
Challenge your
necessarily.
thoughts, right?
Yes.
They may feel automatic, but they're not.
What do you call automatic
Negative thoughts, ants.
Ants.
So if you're feeling antsy, you may be feeling emotionally antsy, and you may just be having some automatic negative thoughts, right?
Yeah.
You need to pause and, check yourself. Whatever you have to do to calm yourself down. You may, we'll go into, like you said, mindfulness maybe in another episode, some deep breathing, some actual techniques that work. Or you can Google some of those.
Yeah.
So that you can emotionally self-regulate, because our biases and our communication barriers that we talked about today absolutely impact how we feel
Right.
and
right.
how we respond to others in our day-to-day relationships.
Absolutely. If you are more aware of your biases,
Yes.
you're going to have a much healthier relationship.
Yes.
And relationships are important.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And communication, effective communication, is very important in healthy relationships.
Yeah.
Hope we answered your questions to the viewers who left the questions for us to respond to. And we hope this was helpful.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful. And please keep talking to us. Keep engaging us.
Yes.
Leave those comments below. And we're going to try to answer and respond to all of them.
Yes.
We're going to definitely do the best that we can.
Absolutely.
And if you get a chance, please subscribe and like the video.
What he said. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.